March 1945, night over the home islands. Thick, unbroken clouds blanket Tokyo and the Kanto Plain, a gray shroud so dense that no star pierces through, no moonlight touches the wooden rooftops below. The air is cold, heavy with the threat of rain. In anti-aircraft batteries scattered across the city, Japanese gunners stand ready, eyes straining upward into nothingness, ears tuned to the distant growing drone of engines. Searchlights sweep uselessly, their beams swallowed by the overcast. Radar operators, hunched over glowing scopes, track faint blicks approaching from the southeast, many hundreds of them, yet the clouds deny any visual confirmation. The night feels impenetrable, protective. Yet in the darkness above, the impossible happens. The American B-29 super fortresses, stripped of much defensive armament to carry maximum payload, descend not to the high altitudes of earlier precision raids, but to low levels, 5,000 to 9,000 feet, where the jet stream no longer hurls them off course. Their bellies house the AN-APQ-13 radar, an advanced ground scanning system born from British H-2S and refined by American engineers at MIT and Bell Laboratories. On the scopes inside each bomber, the coastline glows bright, rivers and bays appear as dark voids, while the dense urban mass of Tokyo registers as a solid, unmistakable return of light. No need to see with human eyes. The radar paints the target through the clouds with clinical precision. Bombardiers, guided by the glowing phosphor images, align their releases. At the calculated moment, bomb bay doors open and clusters of M69 incendiaries tumble into the void below, hundreds of thousands of small firebombs designed to scatter and ignite on impact with wood and paper. This is the night of March 9 to 10, 1945, the single most destructive air raid in human history. In under 3 hours, 279 super fortresses drop over 1,665 tons of incendiaries. 16 square miles of Tokyo burn to ash. Over 100,000 lives are lost, perhaps far more. The firestorm creates its own wind, feeding the flames, turning narrow alleys into infernos. Japanese officers had expected the American campaign to falter. Earlier raids conducted at high altitude in daylight had yielded disappointing results. Factories lightly damaged or missed entirely thanks to the relentless cloud cover, the jet stream winds exceeding 200 knots, and the limitations of the Norden bomb site that demanded clear visual acquisition. They believed their island nation's weather would serve as a natural shield, that the vaunted American precision doctrine would be thwarted by nature itself. Their own radar systems, rudimentary compared to the Allied chain, offered early warning but little guidance for interceptors. Night fighters were few, poorly equipped for high altitude or darkness, and fuel shortages grounded many aircraft. The defenders waited for the bombers to be forced into predictable patterns, vulnerable to flak and fighters on clear days. What they encountered instead shattered every assumption. The Americans had not merely adopted, they had transcended the weather. Radar-guided bombing allowed strikes on overcast nights when Japanese defenses were blind and disorganized. Low-level approaches confounded searchlights and anti-aircraft predictors calibrated for higher altitudes. The incendiaries, tested meticulously at Dugway Proving Ground, exploited Japan's wooden cities with ruthless efficiency. One after another, the great urban centers fell: Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe. By summer, the 315th Bombardment Wing, equipped with the even more advanced AN-APQ-7 Eagle radar, began precise night attacks on oil refineries, demonstrating that even strategic industries could be targeted through darkness and cloud. In bunkers and command posts, stunned staff officers watched reports flood in. Entire districts vanished overnight. Factories, homes, lives, all erased by an enemy they could hear but rarely see. The psychological blow was immense. What began as disbelief turned to grim recognition. American industrial might fused with technological innovation had produced an air force capable of striking anywhere, anytime. The radar in those B-29s symbolized something deeper, a nation whose factories poured forth not just machines, but abundance in every form. Consider the humble loaf of bread carried in the crew rations, soft white bread, fresh from American ovens, plentiful enough that crews discarded stale loaves without a second thought. To men who had endured years of rationing, where rice portions shrank and substitutes like barley and sweet potato became staples, that simple bread represented the vast, inexhaustible productive capacity of the United States. It stood for democracy's quiet power, not the ideology shouted in speeches, but the tangible reality of plenty, the ability to feed armies, build fleets of bombers, and refine radars that pierced clouds like daylight. This technological and material superiority forced a profound transformation. Many Japanese leaders, once convinced of spiritual invincibility and the superiority of their will, began to confront the limits of ideology against industrial output and scientific ingenuity. The fire raids accelerated the erosion of morale among military and civilian alike. By late spring 1945, even before the atomic bombs, the sustained campaign had crippled production, severed supply lines, and left millions homeless. The perception shifted from defiant resistance to grim inevitability. In the end, the radar-guided bombs through thick clouds were more than a tactical innovation. They were a revelation. They demonstrated that freedom and abundance, when harnessed by ingenuity, could reach through any darkness, any veil of weather or illusion. The glowing scope in a B-29 cockpit, mapping a city it could not see, carried a quiet truth. No barrier is absolute when a society commits its full creative power to the cause of liberty. In the ashes of those burned cities, the war's final lesson took shape, that the greatest strength lies not in isolation or fanaticism, but in the open exchange of ideas, the generous production of wealth, and the resolve to defend both. The clouds that once promised protection now drifted over ruins, carrying the faint, lingering scent of white bread and distant freedom.